Hi, I'm Louise Wood and I co-lead the NIHR, and I'm really delighted to be supporting the UK's first Dementia Researcher Careers Festival.
To be successful nowadays in science, you need diversity. You need people from all kinds of walks of life.
We know that for every scientist working in dementia research, there are 4 scientists working in cancer research.
We want to supercharge the next generation of scientists to make the much-needed breakthroughs in both the understanding and intervention in the diseases that cause dementia.
And we have no treatments. We have treatments for cancer, we have treatments for heart disease, but we don't have treatments for the undignified death of dementia.
So nowadays you need chemists, biologists, mathematicians, bioinformaticians, medical doctors, psychologists.
So please think seriously about how you can bring your talents and insights into tackling this awful disease.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this Dementia Careers Festival webinar. My name is Leonie Stephenson-Jones and I'm a Grants Officer at the Alzheimer Society. Thanks so much for joining this session today. This is part of the wider Dementia Research Careers Festival, which is running sessions throughout the week on different topics related to working in dementia research. There's loads more information available on our website on how to get into dementia research at www.dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk/careers, where you'll find blogs, podcasts, and links to guidance on further education. So for today's session, we're going to be looking at an area of research which you might not have realised even existed. While lots of work in dementia is focused on the basic mechanisms underpinning the disease and trying to find potential treatments, there is loads of research looking at the social aspects and care services available to help those with the condition. We're going to hear from 3 researchers who work in the arts and culture space, and we'll have some time for your questions at the end. You can post your questions at any time, whether you're watching on YouTube or Zoom, using the question and answer or comment sections on your screen. And please feel free to ask your question to be directed at a specific person if you think that would be helpful. Our 3 speakers today have different specialisms within the arts and culture research space, and they all have personal experience of the effects of dementia. Dr. Megan Wyatt is an artist and research associate at Wrexham Glyndwr University in Wales. Our second speaker is Dr. Robin Dowlen, a postdoctoral research associate based at the University of Leeds, who researches the links between music and culture and health and well-being. And our final speaker is Dr. Emma Broome, who works on understanding the relationships between hearing and dementia, and she's based at the Biomedical Research Centre in Nottingham. I personally feel that working in a field which will help other people is something which is both really worthwhile and will also bring you a huge sense of personal achievement and satisfaction. So if you're considering a career in dementia research, then I hope you feel encouraged by this session and find it helpful. So now over to our first speaker, Dr. Megan Wyatt from Wrexham Glyndwr University.
So hi everybody. Thanks very much for listening today. I'm going to go through a presentation, so I'll share my screen now with you. I want to talk to you today about arts and dementia research. So I'll start off by talking to you a little bit about what we know about dementia, and particularly arts in dementia. And then I'll go on to talk about what I do and sort of how I've come to where I'm at now. And then most importantly, I'll talk about why arts and dementia research is an amazing field to work in and some of the different ways that you can get involved in that. So just to begin with, what do we know? So some of you may already know this, but dementia is one of the leading causes of death in the UK. And there are currently over 850,000 people living with dementia in the UK. And in 2040, this number is expected to double. So we know it is a huge problem and it's something that's not going away. A cure hasn't been found for it yet. So whilst that research is going on into that, what I'm really interested in is how we can improve the well-being of people living with dementia and support their quality of life. So dementia affects everybody differently, but some common symptoms can include the following, and I thought it was just useful to go over a few. So memory loss, confusion, problems with verbal communication, difficulties with movement, so walking and mobility, and hallucinations. Okay, so what can the arts do, and how can the arts and creativity help? And this is what I am extremely passionate about and think is a really interesting area. So how do people living with dementia engage with and experience painting whilst working alongside an artist researcher? And this is the question that I am really interested in, and this is what I studied in for my PhD. But this question didn't just sort of miraculously happen quickly. It took me a long time to get there. So I thought I'd just talk to you a little bit about how I got involved in dementia research, and it should hopefully sort of show you that there are lots of different ways. My background is in art, so I did a degree in fine art and a master's in art practice. I was fully focused on making artwork. I didn't really know about arts and health or dementia. And then my experience came from a personal experience. So my grandma was diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's disease, and she came to live with me and my family, and I helped care for her until she died. And during that time, she carried on being creative. So even when she wasn't able to talk anymore and she was very poorly, I noticed that she still carried on being creative, and she'd draw or she'd paint. And that was a really good way for me to be able to connect with her. And that's how I got interested in it. I was very aware that that experience was quite unique. It was just me and one other person, my grandma. I was very close to her, and I didn't really have an idea of how to apply any of this to the outside world, let alone get a job. So I decided to volunteer, and I volunteered in different arts and dementia projects. And then when I was more experienced and confident, I started being an artist facilitator and doing my own. And then finally, I got a job within a university where I developed and managed different arts and health projects across Wales, and I specialised in creative dementia projects. And during that time, I then enrolled for a PhD, and after many years of thinking about it, I came up with this question. And my PhD suggested that when a person living with dementia works alongside an artist researcher, so I was that artist researcher, and that was important to me, that I was able to use my creative skills and my skills as an artist as a kind of key point within my research. So the findings suggested that when painting, people living with dementia can express personal memories and feelings, embrace feelings of uncertainty, decision make through reflective experiences, and engage in an immersive experience. And what I'm really interested in is that all these experiences don't require any verbal communication. So, and that's something that people living with dementia often struggle with. After I completed my PhD, so it was exactly 2 years ago actually, I worked at different universities working on different research projects with people living with dementia, and I'm now based at Wrexham Glyndwr University. Here, I just thought this was a nice slide to show you this. These are the paintings that were created when I worked with the participants living with dementia within my PhD, and you can kind of see the breadth of things that people depicted, and I just thought it was just really nice to see some pictures of what was actually created. So I'm going to move on now to talk about why dementia research is such a good thing to work in. This presentation could go on for absolutely ages if I listed every reason why, but what I've tried to do is pin it down to 2 slides. So the first is dementia research needs you. It needs creative people, people who are interested in the arts, people who can innovate who can use their ideas to really sort of help influence and shape things. I know that when I left university, I sort of assumed that dementia research was something that people who were more maybe interested in the sciences might be involved in. And I had absolutely no idea about this whole area where artists and creative people could get involved in. So that's just something to be really mindful of. You know, there's a lot of room for creativity within dementia research, and I think that's something which is really exciting. The next one is dementia research is a really exciting and fulfilling area to work in. You're able to meet loads of new people, listen to people, all sorts of people with different perspectives and ideas. Things are constantly evolving. You're finding out new things all the time. And you're kind of just discovering what's going on. And I think that's something that keeps it very fresh and keeps you very driven to carry on within this area. It's never boring, and it never feels like it becomes old. And I think that's something that's really valuable when you're working in research. So finally, I wanted to give you a few points about how you can get involved in dementia research. And again, this is kind of a very brief snapshot, but it's mostly based on my experiences of getting involved in dementia research, and also when I've supported students to get involved in dementia research. And the first one, which may seem like a bit of a funny one, but it's volunteering. Volunteering is an amazing way to try something new and to gain experience and to kind of boost your confidence. I think it can be annoying because you're not getting paid, and that's something that you have to weigh up yourself. However, on the other hand, it means that there's not that pressure, and it allows you to sit back and learn and think about what you want to do. And there are lots of opportunities to volunteer within the field of dementia. So I've just bullet pointed a few places that you might want to look if that's something you're interested in. So Alzheimer's Society do different volunteering schemes, and within that there's memory cafes, so they're quite often looking for people to deliver creative sessions and do things like that. That's something that I did. Age UK, you can contact local care homes, hospitals, find out about local community groups, and just volunteer. And you can either volunteer where you have more of a role where you're in charge delivering, say, an arts workshop or whatever you want to do, or you might just want to sit back and observe and assist somebody else. So I think that's something to definitely bear in mind. The next way is education and training. So there are specific university courses out there which specialise in dementia, and that's something that you could look into. And then there's more sort of either informal training or perhaps basic training. So the Alzheimer's Society do one. There's Dementia Friends training. So I did that when I first started out, and that helps you to understand how to communicate with a person living with dementia and some of the basic things that you need to know. There's also arts and health training. I've just put a couple down there. So there's Willis Newson, and they've been doing some really good training, which is online. So you could have a look at them. And then there's also the Welsh Arts and Health Wellbeing Network, and they are predominantly based in Wales, but they also advertise opportunities which are more universal and quite, some of their things are free. So they're just useful to have a look at. The other thing I'd recommend is look out for jobs. And in the past, this is how I've got jobs, general Google searches, sign up to job websites, see what's going on, put keywords in so you're constantly getting notified. University websites, look at what universities do dementia research and what types of research you might be interested in, and try and contact them, go in, meet people. Organisation websites, and then artjobs.org.uk. They do specific art related jobs, but sometimes they have different jobs relating to dementia on. Know what's going on. I think it's important to kind of try and talk to people and listen to what other people are saying. I've put the Dementia Researcher website up there because that is an amazing resource. You feel really supported. you get to hear about what's going on all the time. You're speaking to people who are interested in the same things as you or different things. And I know for me as an early career researcher, that's something that I found to be really beneficial. And then just conferences, dementia events, arts and health, early career research network, they're good to sign up to, and they do different webinars and things that are for free sometimes, and you can just listen again to what other people are doing, and it might help you get an idea of what you want to do and how you can get into it. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm aware I've kind of given you a lot of information in a really short space of time, but I think there's a question bit at the end, so you can ask me anything then. And I've also put my email, so if you want to kind of contact me for any more information, then please feel free. But yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Megan. That was really great. That was so moving to hear how art can help people with dementia to connect with others and like express their thoughts and feelings. And also I think just to hear how people can apply their different skills to help other people's quality of life. It's really great to hear. Brilliant. So we'll now be hearing from our next speaker, who is Dr. Robyn Dowlen, and she's a postdoctoral research associate based in Leeds. So I'll hand over to her now.
Thanks so much. I think there's going to be quite a few parallels between mine and Megan's presentations. So I will share my screen. So I'm going to talk you through my dementia research journey, and I'm going to take you back quite a long way, because I think it's important to give you the context of why I've ended up in the kind of world of culture, health and well-being. So my journey started quite early. So I was encouraged to start a musical instrument at age 5, and I chose to play the violin. And I always have a lot of sympathy for my parents, because the violin doesn't sound great for the first few years that you're playing it, but it's something that I was able to hone as a skill as I went down the line. And the bottom left picture is me dressed as Vera Lynn in 2000, when my school did a musical based on the different decades from the 1900s leading up to the millennium. And this is when I really discovered my joy of singing, after being given a solo to sing We'll Meet Again. And this led to me joining the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra's youth chorus, and I was very privileged to be able to perform on stages across the world with this choir. So it was no surprise that for my GCSEs I chose predominantly arts and humanities subjects. So I did music, drama, history and religious studies, and enjoyed these so much that I took a few of them to A-level as well. So English literature, theatre studies and politics. I was very privileged that I always followed the subjects that really enjoyed me and that I really enjoyed and got excited about. And just before applying for my A-levels, I read this book by Oliver Sacks, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And this is when I began to sort of explore the world of psychology and became really interested in human behaviour and what we can learn in terms of well-being and preventing or supporting people through traumatic experiences or brain injury. And so this led me to study a BSc in psychology at Cardiff University. And honestly, psychology turned out to be a lot more sciencey than I had expected. And I remember being very downtrodden on receiving my first ever grade at university of 48 on an assignment based on the brain and axons and neurons, and I felt as if I had perhaps picked the wrong course. But then I began to excel in other areas within psychology, so more of the sort of social psychology elements, cognitive psychology, and I became really interested in the brain and how it worked, but it wasn't my strong suit. So I wanted to find a way to be able to understand the brain without having to know exactly what was going on from a sort of micro level. And I did end up doing a lab-based dissertation project as part of my undergrad. But my interest in research was really, it really blossomed during my placement year. And I would always advise that a placement year is a real opportunity to get to know what you maybe want to do after you finish an undergrad. And I was a research assistant at the Cerebral Centre for Neurodevelopmental Disorders, which sort of focuses on rare genetic conditions in children and the impacts it has on both the child and their families. And this is where my passion for research really began, because I was able to see the difference that could be made from understanding the challenges faced by a particular population and how the research findings could impact on their day-to-day lives. So I supported 2 PhD researchers with their projects that were looking at social anxiety and executive function in rare genetic disorders. So when I returned to Cardiff, I decided that I was going to apply for a master's in research with psychology as the focus. And this was my first introduction to qualitative research methods. My undergrad had been purely quantitative methods, and at times the stats modules just boggled my mind a little bit. But during this year in Manchester, I volunteered as a Dementia Friends Champion. So this is obviously something in common with Megan, and I think it's something really important to consider. And this is where I began to learn more about dementia and the stigma that is associated with the condition, and how sort of simple tasks and storytelling can really help to change people's perceptions of what it means to live with dementia. And at this time, I also volunteered as a research assistant with Manchester Camerata, and I supported an evaluation of their music and arts programme for children living with autism. And this is where I learned about creative research methods. So we would sit with the children and ask them to draw their experience and use that as a way to get them to talk about their well-being and how the project had impacted on them. And then during my master's year was when my PhD research project was advertised. And I was so excited to see something that brought together 3 things that I was so passionate about: dementia, music, and psychology. So my PhD looked at understanding the in-the-moment benefits of music making for people living with dementia. And it was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, and it was a case studentship, which meant that it was supervised by both academic and industry supervisors. So the industry partner was Manchester Camerata, who have a music making programme for people living with dementia based on improvisation rather than the kind of singing of familiar repertoire, which is more commonly out there. And it was just such a pleasure to do this piece of research and get to know 6 people living with dementia and their family members on a really personal level, because I took part in the music making myself, as well as doing the research within the group. And it was just such a wonderful opportunity to find ways in which music could enable connections between people living with dementia and those who support them. And I was able to learn more about creative research methods as well as a way to understand lived experience. So the bottom right picture isn't an activity I've done with people living with dementia, but it's an activity I've done with researchers where I ask them to convey their research using Play-Doh. And it's really fun, and it also enables people to take that step back and think about the sort of simplest ways to present research to audiences outside of an area of expertise. So I was awarded my PhD in early 2019, and then after my PhD, I went on to work on the Neighbourhoods and Dementia project for a year on 2 work programmes, one of which was looking at the ways in which we can use co-research to allow people living with dementia to share their experiences of research in a way that's really empowering and enables them to have real voice within the research. And then I also worked on another work programme which looked at the development of a tablet-based application which enabled couples where one person was living with dementia to find activities to do together outside of that common cared for role. So really supporting their relationship throughout the person's dementia journey. And since leaving University of Manchester, I've joined the Centre for Cultural Value at the University of Leeds. And my role there is in scoping and synthesising literature relating to cultural value, which is a very broad term, but my specialism at the moment is in culture, health and well-being. So although it's broader than culture and dementia, it definitely falls within this umbrella. And so I've been able to take what I've learned from understanding the role of music in the lives of people with dementia to be able to apply it more broadly to other populations, such as young people, older people without a diagnosis of dementia, and also looking at things like social prescribing and arts on prescription. And I've been very lucky in the past year that I've been able to develop a podcast series that's based on some of the research findings. And I'll just take a step back, because during my PhD research, I was able to be a panelist on the Dementia Researcher podcast, one of which I spoke about my experiences of my PhD viva, which can appear quite scary, but it was a great conversation. And then the other was about developing good relationships with supervisors, because I had a very unusual supervision structure where I had 5 supervisors, which is incredibly unusual, but had some real strengths as well as challenges at times. Another thing to note is that I am part of the committee for the Creative Ageing Special Interest Group, and we host a variety of webinars and discussion groups and bring together researchers, practitioners and policymakers to discuss this area of creative ageing, which dementia forms a part of. And then Megan mentioned it as well, but I'm also part of the Early Career Research Network. And there are some fantastic resources on this website, as well as a really great blog. And I know it's great because I'm the blog editor, and I find it fascinating being able to go through blogs that are submitted that focus on different areas of arts, humanities, health and medicine. So I hope that gives you an overview of the kind of very different career trajectory that you might expect from a dementia researcher. And just echoing everything Megan said about the reasons why to go into this area. It's just so amazing to be able to support people living with dementia to live really meaningful and fulfilling lives through creativity, arts and culture. So just some contact details if you want to find out more. But yeah, we'll end there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Robin. That was so interesting. I'm actually a musician myself, so it's really nice to hear about your PhD and how this can help, how musical activities can help people living with dementia. I think, yeah, something that's coming out of what we've heard so far is that it's possible to get to know people really well involved in your study and get to know them on a personal level. And I think that must be so rewarding to see the benefits to people's quality of life firsthand. So this is just a reminder to post your questions in the question and answer box. Keep them coming. This is your chance to ask the people working in dementia right now. And we'll now move on to our final speaker, who is Dr. Emma Broome, who works on understanding the relationships between hearing and dementia. So I'll pass over to her now.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me one moment. So I'm hoping you can all see this. So thank you so much. It's been really interesting to hear about Robin and Megan's journey. So I thought to start with, it would be really useful for me to just give you a background view of my career path to date. So similar to Robin, when I was younger, I was encouraged to take up a musical instrument. So I have a very similar picture of me playing a flute and my brother playing the guitar at one of our family parties. But it didn't make the PowerPoint presentation. But so I've always had a musical background. So I'm a singer as well. So for my undergraduate degree, I studied in Canada and I did a double degree. So I did a degree in psychology and a degree in English. And following that, I always knew that I wanted to do a master's, and I was really interested in psychology. So I decided to pursue a master's in mental health, specialising in psychological therapies. And the reason I put this little comic at the side is just to show that, like, what you think your career path will be like, it's not a linear trajectory. In reality, there's lots of bumps and different puzzle pieces that have to come together. So doing my master's, I was still living in Canada, so I did it distance learning. And as part of that master's course, I had to have a clinical placement, and my clinical placement was at a long-term care facility with people with cognitive impairment and or mental health issues as well. And I ran a weekly music group, which I continued to run after I'd finished my placement because I just got so much from it and I enjoyed it. And it was that placement that really kind of sparked my interest in dementia research. And I started looking for different PhD opportunities, and I saw one advertised by the Alzheimer Society as part of the Tandem Doctoral Training Centre. So Tandem stands for the Arts and Dementia, and it was a collaboration between the University of Nottingham and the University of Worcester. And there were 8 PhD students all looking at different areas of arts and dementia research. So I moved from Canada to Nottingham to start my PhD. Which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. So I did that from 2015 to 2018, and then had a year off on maternity leave. And I say off because I finished writing my thesis and submitted and had my viva while still on maternity leave. So yeah, that was a challenge, but one that I was able to overcome. And since then, I've worked as a postdoctoral researcher on a project called Aqueduct, which is an NIHR funded project looking at crisis teams that support people with dementia. And since then, I've moved into a different field, working in hearing sciences on a 3-year postdoctoral research position. But as part of this role, I have the opportunity to build my own fellowship application. So although I'm working in hearing research at the moment, I'm hoping to bring together the strands of dementia research and hearing research, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So my motivation for going into dementia research is kind of twofold. So it's both personal and professional. So that's a picture of my grandma on the left, who was diagnosed with vascular dementia and who I helped care for up until the end of her life. But her husband, my grandfather, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in, I think it was the year 2000. And I remember my mum telling me that when he was diagnosed, he just said, well, I don't have much to look forward to then. And I was only a child at the time, but kind of my personal motivation for wanting to pursue a research career was to kind of tell people like him that there is hope for the future, and that there are people working on drug trials and doing lab-based research, but also social research on how we can encourage people to live well with dementia and pursue activities that they still enjoy. And then my professional experience goes back to the clinical placement. And the reason I've got a picture of Elvis Presley on the screen is because when I was running the music group, there was one lady that I noticed was completely non-verbal, and she didn't speak to any of the staff and didn't seem to really interact. So I had a chat with her family, and it turned out she absolutely loved Elvis Presley. So we started to incorporate that into the weekly music group, and it got to the point where she actually would start to sing along because she remembered the song lyrics, and she really I was really able to connect with her, and she'd take my hand and we'd sing together. And it was that just really showed me the power of music in particular, but also the creative arts and how they can they're so beneficial for people living with dementia. So just to talk a little bit about my my research to date. So my PhD was looking at a programme called Imagine Arts. So Imagine was a 3-year participatory arts programme in care homes in Nottingham, which was funded by Arts Council England and the Bearing Foundation. And the top right picture there, there's a lady working on an iPad. So Imagine had a broad range of different art forms. There was digital art, music therapy, drama, theatre, puppetry, poetry. It was so varied. But what really struck me was the important role that the care staff played in how people with dementia experienced the creative art intervention in the care home. So to give you an example, there was one singing session where everybody was given song sheets, but one resident wasn't participating, and I went and had a chat with her, and it turned out she didn't have her glasses with her, so she couldn't read the song sheet and she didn't know the words, so she couldn't participate. And it was just small things like that that made me, realise the importance that staff have in how care home residents access these type of activities. And what I noticed in my research was that when staff were participating alongside people with dementia, the person got so much more out of the session and they were able to engage, and it also kind of fostered a relationship between the staff and the resident that wasn't just one of someone caring for, it was like doing something with and doing something together. So I finished my PhD in 2018, and then more recently I've been involved in Matinee, which is funded by the Paul Hamlyn Foundation and Arts Derbyshire, and that's a dementia-friendly cinema screenings project in community settings in Derbyshire. So I've been involved in the evaluation. So unfortunately that's paused because of COVID at the moment, but that's just another example of kind of the breadth of dementia research that's happening right now. So obviously more recently I've moved into hearing sciences, but there's quite a lot of overlap between my work in dementia research. I'm hoping to kind of tie all those different strands together moving forward. So thinking about the research potential in this area, it's just so wide, and I think, as Megan said, you can be so creative in what you do. So I was particularly interested in person-centered care and care staff, and how we can use creative mediums to kind of foster the relationship between residents and kind of improve the well-being of residents and staff, because I think there are benefits for both. And now moving into hearing research, I just realised there's such a lot of overlap between hearing loss and what people with dementia experience in terms of loneliness and social isolated by the pandemic. So I think when you're thinking about dementia research, there's so much potential, and you can just be really creative and innovative in what you want to do, and you can kind of find what you're passionate about and collaborate with different people. So why should you pursue a career in dementia research? I agree with everything that Megan and Robin has said so far. I've just found it's so rewarding. Everyone that I speak to, people I don't know, like taxi drivers when we used to be able to go out, or people in shops, or just new people that I'm meeting, when I tell them that I'm working in dementia research, everyone seems to have personal experience with dementia, and they're so interested in what we're doing. And thinking back to my PhD research, some of the iPad work that we had looked at in care homes, I was able to take that and use that knowledge that I gained with my grandma. So I remember after she'd had a stroke, I took the iPad to the hospital with me, and we were using like sensory apps on the iPad, and she just thoroughly enjoyed it, and even the doctors were getting involved, and it was kind of a talking point for her. So it was just really, really rewarding to kind of put what I was seeing in practice and take it into my personal life. And also I just think it gives people hope. And just thinking back to when my granddad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I wish I could just have this conversation with him now and say that, that the stigma around dementia is lessening, and that, people are living well, and there's amazing people with dementia who are great spokespeople, and people participating in research. And it's just, I think it gives people hope for what the future can bring, and that a diagnosis of dementia isn't the end of someone's life. There's just so much you can do to still enjoy your life and maintain your hobbies and live well. And also it's just it's such a multidisciplinary field. So on my supervisory team, I had a psychiatrist, a social worker, and a psychologist, and every day to interact with different people, and in particular the patient and public representatives who we've worked with. They all have such interesting stories, and when you work with them and incorporate their views into your research, it's just so valuable. And hearing their stories, and that was just one of the things I found so rewarding, is working with people who have lived experience and hearing their stories. And then just thinking about the variety of this type of work, no one day is the same. So at the moment I'm presenting to you, but yesterday I was conducting a virtual interview. I used to volunteer at a memory cafe. I could be doing an online questionnaire. Like, there's so much variety in what we do, and you can there's so many transferable skills. So thinking about the creative methods that you can use, you can apply them in any different research area. So I just think, there's so much variety, and you can just learn so many new skills, which will stand you in good stead for whichever direction you go for in a future career. So I thought it might be useful to just kind of end with some top tips. I think it's really important to find an area that you're passionate about, and obviously it appears that we've all come from quite creative backgrounds. So I think if you find what you're really interested in and what you're passionate about, your passion sells itself, and that stands you in really good stead when you're interviewing for different research positions. And also, it's important to talk to people who have the lived experience and find out what's important to them and how it can make your work more meaningful. And my other advice would be to collaborate and to talk to people. So put yourself out there, and it can seem quite daunting at first, but it's just really great if you want to pursue a research career, to talk to different people at different universities, so that you find the right fit for yourself. But also it just paves the way for future projects, and you can kind of be creative and brainstorm different ideas with different people, and be really innovative. And then I'd suggest also finding a support network, whether that's friends, families, or colleagues, because in academia there are lots of highs, but there are also lows, and it can be quite difficult not to get down, if you're not successful first time. So having a good support network around you and using resources like the Dementia Researcher website is really important. And one of the things I found really valuable was my colleagues who were also studying for their PhD and kind of sharing that experience. So I think that's something that I'd definitely recommend. So I think that's everything for now, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any, and thank you for letting me share my experience.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Emma. That was so interesting. And I think that voice of hope that you talked about is so important. I think there's hope in all sorts of ways, really. And it just shows that there really is the potential for people to live well with dementia. And I mean, we're also finding out more about the disease on a basic science level and how to treat it all the time. So yeah, the voice of hope really is there, and it's really important. So we've now got some time to answer your questions. So keep them coming if you have any more that you think of. And I'd like to invite all of our speakers back, and also Adam Smith, who has organised the Careers Week, who's helping to manage the questions.
Hi, Leonie, and thank you very much for chairing today.
Thanks, yeah. No problem.
And thank you, we should add, to the Alzheimer Society, who are such a fantastic funder of creative arts and dementia research, and were very early on one of the amazing organisations to recognise the value of this and the importance it can bring to people's lives, both in managing agitation, but also to live as well as they can, as well as people can with the diagnosis. So thank you to Alzheimer's Society for that, and your work personally in reviewing all those grant applications that you get, which I know must be tricky. And thanks to everybody. We should add as well, it's been brilliant because we've had so much engagement from our three panelists before on Dementia Researcher that we have podcasts and things with both Megan and Robin. We haven't had you, Emma. We'll have to get you on the show. You can find a bio for Dr. Emma Broome on our website, and I was fascinated because you've had such a broad experience as well in so many areas of creative arts and dementia. So we're definitely going to have to get you on our podcast show. We have a question from that somebody had sent me in advance, actually, which was to say that they're currently studying a degree in music at university. They, like you, have had a relative and have had some lived experience and firsthand of somebody with dementia, but have no idea on how they go from a music degree to becoming a dementia researcher. And they'd asked the question whether they had to go off and do a second master's in neuroscience, or what were the natural steps, do you feel, for them to take their music degree and apply that in dementia research?
I'm happy to have a go at answering this one. I think a music degree gives you such a good grounding in your practice as a musician. And while my background has kind of taken me through the route of psychology, I have so many colleagues who have gone from arts-based degrees into dementia research. And I'm currently supporting a master's student who is doing that journey herself. And so I think what's really important is to get your head around the different literature that's out there relating to music and dementia, as well as understanding the practice, because you can use so many different research methods in this area to really understand it. So I got my 48% in my first assignment that had that neuroscience sort of element to it, and so I didn't do any of that as part of my PhD research. It was looking at sort of more social research methods, which you'll have a grounding in through, I'm assuming you'll do some sort of participatory music making components of your degree. And so it's just thinking about what you're good at and what methods might fit into that. And then the world's your oyster, really, when it comes to research. There's so many different researchers working in this field that will have different experiences, and so don't go off and do a neuroscience degree unless you really want to, and that's something that you think will improve your skill set.
Is it likely, do you think, Robyn, that you see jobs like this advertised somewhere? You know, if you come out of university, is there a place where you think you'll go and you will find jobs that say that they're looking at music and dementia? I know certainly PhD opportunities would get advertised. And that's actually, we've had a question from Ashlyn Thomas, who asks, is a PhD necessary, do you feel? Obviously, you've all got PhDs, so I don't know if that's a bad example. Is it necessary? Did you have to do this PhD? Could you be doing the work you're doing now without it, do you think? And where would you find jobs? Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of where to find jobs, there are so many different contexts in which you can work if you're looking at the arts and dementia or culture and dementia. There's just a burgeoning field of museums work with people living with dementia, which museums themselves would advertise. There's the kind of more health side of things. So I know there was an advert recently for an arts facilitator or an arts-based program manager at Manchester Royal Infirmary. So the jobs are everywhere. I think it just really depends on what kind of thing you're interested in. So there's singing for the brain practitioners if you wanted to go and lead those kind of sessions. There's also the more kind of community-based practice as well. So there's a lot more money going into link workers for social prescribing at the moment. And those are people who would signpost to different services, of which arts and culture are one of them. And in terms of a PhD, I mean, it is possible to do research without a PhD. I have so many colleagues who work as freelance evaluators and consultants in this area who are supporting cultural organisations to develop really rigorous evaluation and research to support this idea that there is real value in engaging with arts and culture for people living with dementia. But yeah, if I hadn't have done a PhD, I don't know where I'd be right now. Hopefully still in this area in some way.
Emma, did you have anything to add to that? You looked like you might have.
No, I was only just thinking that if you come from a music background, if you're looking to pursue a PhD, you can always look for a supervisor that has different experience to your own. So you might have a supervisor who's based in the music department, but you could also add a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You can blend. So I think that's why it's really important to kind of have conversations with people. Many people are happy to be contacted on Twitter or email and have an informal chat about their research area, because I think finding good mentors is really valuable and you can learn so much. So I just know, having a multidisciplinary supervisory team myself, they each brought different strengths and help direct my work, and I learned so many different skills. So you don't have to be too prescriptive about just having a music supervisor. You can broaden your supervisory team if you're thinking about a PhD.
And would you say that's the same in art, Megan?
Yeah, so like Robyn and Emma said, I think there's lots of different ways to get into dementia research. I think with regards to your question about a PhD, I think I would find it hard to do sort of the level of research that you do kind of within these research posts if you didn't have a PhD, but then maybe that just comes to experience. And if you've got experience of evaluating different projects and things like that. And I think it's just about when you do a creative degree, so a music degree or a fine art degree, I think it's about really acknowledging the skills that you learn. And I think it's, I know I did anyway, found it quite hard to understand how I could transfer those skills to any kind of job. But actually, I think you learn a lot, and I think the skills that you have are really valuable, and it's about acknowledging them and applying for jobs and getting involved in things and understanding that they can be transferred into different areas, if that makes sense.
I mean, I suppose we would sell the idea of a PhD because we're trying to encourage people to do research. Because you don't have to work in academia. You can work in the many jobs and professions that surround research and support the research to happen. I suppose a PhD in itself is also primarily is a learning role. It's you're going to learn about the research process. You're going to learn how to evaluate, how to do critical analysis, and I think through doing a PhD, you might find it isn't the hands-on interaction with people that perhaps you enjoy the most. It could be looking at the data at the side of this. It could be about producing tools and resources that other people can use perhaps. And I think, of course, you all do work with. Am I right in thinking perhaps, Emma, is it the same for you? Do you all work hands-on with people living with dementia and carers? You do. But I suppose particularly in art, I'm thinking about there are other jobs that aren't necessarily that. I mean, we've got science illustrators that do some amazing graphics and illustrations for journals and magazines. I'm thinking of people exporting memories have produced great movies and things, haven't they? And part of reminiscence therapy. So it isn't all art and music therapy. There are other areas around dementia research that comes in. Oh, we've had another question, a few more questions actually. So Alex W asks, do you have any examples of some of the projects you volunteered? I'm going to come to you first, I think, Emma, because you seem to have that place where you went seemed to have lots going on. It wasn't all just one thing.
Yeah, so my first role at that hospital was a clinical placement as part of my master's, but I actually stayed on and volunteered in my own time to run a weekly music group for people with dementia and people with mental health issues. But I've also volunteered at a memory cafe in the community. So they ran weekly sessions. Obviously they're paused at the moment, but one session every month was art space. So we might have people come in and do clay modelling or reminiscence therapy, or there'd be some kind of musical activity as well. So that's kind of my experience of volunteering. But I think, Megan, you had more experience as well. You spoke about some volunteering.
Yeah, I did a lot of volunteering at the beginning, so I was working in a shop, so it wasn't anything to do with arts or dementia. So in my spare time, like you, I worked I did a memory cafe session, and then I also, sort of the very start of my volunteering, I started off with a group called Lost in Art. So they were an already set up arts group with an artist facilitator, and they were based at Ruthin Craft Centre, which is a gallery in Wales, and they did different types of artwork. And I think because there was another artist facilitator there who was able to take the lead, I could just kind of sit back and watch how they did it. And then I went on to look at different care homes within North Wales, which is where I was based, and just I created a pack basically saying what I could offer. And I ran these kind of voluntary workshops for them. And then that led to paid work. So that was quite good. So I sort of built it up over time.
So I'm just trying to think of the answer to that question. So most of your projects have been hands-on with people, both supporting them to create their own artwork or to create music. Is that right as well? Robin, is this in a particular setting? Is this in care homes or in communities or just in memory cafes or in people's own homes? Where does this kind of activity take place?
I think it's all over the place. There is such a wide range of different music programs that are available to people living with dementia at the moment. And if it's something that anyone is interested in looking into further, Arts for the number 4 Dementia have a fantastic resource, which is a signposting service to different arts and cultural activities that happen across the country. But it's a real range. You can have you have organisations like Playlists for Life, who specifically support people living with dementia to get iPods with their personal playlists on them to support that kind of sharing of life story and reminiscence. And that's a charity. You then have kind of bigger organisations like Music for Dementia 2020, who are doing some fantastic work at the moment. I know they've got Lauren Laverne on board as one of their sort of patrons. So it's music in the broadest sense. I think people automatically assume that when you talk about music for people with dementia, it's music therapy. And this is one specific career path that someone can specialise in and get accreditation. But it can be as simple as taking a radio over to someone so that they can listen to their favourite gospel music radio station or something like that. It's everywhere. It's in our everyday lives. So it is possible to integrate it into a person living with dementia's day-to-day lives.
We did have if you look through our YouTube channel, we had a webinar earlier last year from an academic in Canada that was using silent disco technology, and they were exploring about the idea of using silent disco technology in a hospital setting where people could have their own individual music playlists as a way to deal with some of the loneliness and things that people were experiencing, and to get people to also encourage physical movement and health. So they were encouraging dancing and things which we know can help. Exercise and things can help prolong and delay some of the onset of some of the symptoms of dementia as well. We have a question from Francis King, who asks, do you support individuals or is it just groups in care homes as a whole? So do you work with individuals as well? Megan, would you want to?
Yeah, so I've done both, and I think it depends on the setting and also who you're working with and what their needs are. So for my PhD, I worked individually with people living with dementia and their care partners if they wanted to. So that was on a one-to-one basis. I think sometimes, unfortunately, it can come down to funding, and there might not be enough funding for you to, spend time working with just one person. That project needs more of an impact across more people. So then I've done group work in hospitals and in care homes particularly, but I think it just depends on the needs of the people and where you're doing it and kind of what that project is looking for. And I think, so for example, in the hospital project, people have been in hospital for a really long time and they were quite unwell. And so with that, it was about trying to create activities where they could engage with their wife or their child. So people would come and visit them, and it was about setting up an activity that they could then work together between the two of them. So I think it's just about being flexible to what's being required of you.
Yes. And actually, funding is an important point there, and volunteering and things. Leonie, I'm thinking about the Alzheimer's Society. Are there ways that anybody listening who's just coming out of university with a qualification like this can get involved in the Alzheimer's Society to support any of their work?
Yeah, I was definitely going to say that actually about do you have to do a PhD to go into this area? And I guess the thing is that if you came to work at the Alzheimer's Society, to get involved in community work related to arts and dementia, that itself probably wouldn't necessarily be research. It would be like community work, but it would still be involved in that area if you had an interest in that. But yeah, I was definitely going to recommend having a look at the Alzheimer's Society jobs webpage, and also Alzheimer's Research UK and any other similar charities.
And this came up at our webinar yesterday, with people saying that if you were to apply for a PhD program, asking what hands-on experience you've had in a certain area is a section on the form. So going to do some volunteering work or going to take a paid job with the Alzheimer's Society or in a care home or in a NHS hospital working in this space will definitely help you when it comes time to apply for that PhD. We also have a blog on our website today from Clarissa Gleeble, Dr. Clarissa Gleeble, from the University of Liverpool, talking about how it's quite possible to work and study at the same time. So if you are a jobbing freelance musician or artist or one of these, creative, working in this creative art space, it's quite possible to study for your PhD at the same time as earning a living, because, I think everybody's circumstances will be different, and, you can't always live off afford to go away and do a full-time PhD. But have a look on our website and have a look at the blogs, which can explain how it is possible to do both those things at the same time. Did all of you study full-time for your PhDs, or no?
I did full-time.
Yes,
Megan, you didn't. How did you find working and studying at the same time? How long did it take you then to do your PhD, and what advice would you give to anybody who is thinking of studying and doing a PhD whilst working?
So I worked throughout my PhD. So it took me 5 years, or five and a bit years, to complete. And I think for me, I can remember leaving university and sort of listening to people who'd done PhDs and talks and thinking, oh, I'm just never going to get there. And I think it's just about picking away. And I think Emma's diagram of what your career path is like is really helpful.
Yeah, well, that's really helpful.
Because you think that kind of everybody's gone on this straight sort of line of getting to where they have, and I had jobs that weren't anything to do with arts and dementia. So I worked in a school, I worked in a shop at the start of my PhD. And over time, you pick away at your knowledge and your experience of working with people living with dementia. And then I got a job working in arts and health. And that was quite a big break for me. It wasn't research, but at least it was sort of something that I was interested in. And I think you just have to keep plodding away. And, there are times when I needed to work and I couldn't focus fully on my PhD, and you have to kind of let yourself be flexible. I think that would be my advice, and not worry too much about it. Just have that end aim that you will get there. I just kept thinking about my graduation day and kept thinking that will happen at some point. and it does. And then you do find yourself in a good situation where you feel like you can apply for the types of jobs that you've been aiming for. But I think to just keep going and don't be too hard on yourself and be flexible is my advice.
Oh, it's great to know that it is possible, and you're a fantastic example of that. We've got one last question, unless anybody, so probably your last chance now to post questions while I read out this last one. It's from Michelle, who asks, my background is in history and museums, and my current role is at a museum running a program of health and well-being activities, mostly for people living with dementia. At the museum, I've been involved with several research projects with Newcastle and Northumbria University, but also some European universities, which I found incredibly interesting. I'd like to take the leap into a career in research myself, but I really do love my job. So I'm sure it will be possible to do both. Long and where do I start from? Okay, so actually we've just talked about that, haven't we? So Michelle, I think we'd like to assure you it is quite possible to do your job and to study for a PhD as well. So how would you go about that then? I mean, how would Michelle go about perhaps, so you can study for a part-time master's. I guess you could do a master's course part-time if you haven't already studied at university. You can have, I think with certain master's programs will allow you to participate in them based on your vocational qualifications or what you've done in your job. If you did go to university, that would usually qualify you to participate in a master's as long as you graduated, depending on, I think most accept 2-2. I think once from looking at, we do have a directory, I should add, on our website of all the higher education dementia courses that we've been able to find across the country. are on our website. So if you go to find and then look down under higher education, you can filter across those, and there will be a filter in there looking at arts or activities. If you apply that filter, it'll show you the courses that are available, and many of these are remote right now. We've got a talk at 9 o'clock in the morning on Thursday from the Wicking Dementia Institute, which are based at the University of Tasmania in Australia, that run a fully online dementia master's program, which includes little bits of neuroscience and arts and activities and all kinds of things. So do join that webinar on 9 a.m. I think it's Thursday, not Wednesday. Details are on our website. So where would you start though? So you're working in a museum right now. You've decided you'd like to re-enter education. What would, based on your experience, where does Michelle go from there?
Well, it's very similar to some of the things that relate to my PhD research, and I think it's really important to recognise that a lot of the questions in this area of arts and dementia don't come from these ivory tower institutions in academia, but they actually are questions that come from the cultural sector, because you guys are the experts when it comes to working practically with people living with dementia. And so what I would say is have a look at programmes like the Economic and Social Research Council's case studentship programmes, which allow partnerships with cultural organisations. So mine was the Orchestra Manchester Camerata. Your organisation that you're working for now could be a partner within your own research. And then have a search for academics who are working in this field. So Newcastle University in particular has a very strong cultural gerontology team who do a lot of work around ageing and dementia. So there may be some researchers in that area who'd be interested in having a conversation with you. Someone who's very big in this area, who you may or may not be aware of, is Professor Helen Chatterjee at University College London. She's done some amazing work looking at research in the context of museums and the well-being of people living with dementia. So I would say, if there's a question that is burning in the back of your brain that you think a research project would help to answer, there are so many options when it comes to developing your own practice as a researcher. Many of the sort of UKRI funding bodies do the option to have a 1+3 programme. So the first year of your study would be developing your research methods as part of a master's that is integrated within your PhD funding. So that means you would get paid to do your master's. So have a look at those kind of programmes, because I think they're fantastic ways to develop your research practice while still grounding yourself within your background in museums and history.
Fantastic, thank you, Robyn. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Where Michelle goes next? No. I think that's all of. Oh, she says that was very useful. That was a good reply. Thank you very much, Michelle. Okay, I think that's the last of our questions, Leonie.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. And thanks again to all our speakers for giving their time and sharing their work and experiences. I think it's been really great to hear from people who are working in the field right now. So if you want to hear any of this webinar again, the session has been recorded and it will be uploaded shortly to the Dementia Researcher YouTube channel. Do take a look at the Dementia Researcher website to find out more about careers in this area. And I'd also encourage you to sign up to the other webinars running throughout the week. We've also got a social event lined up for 4 p.m. this Friday, where you can video chat with some of today's presenters and other early career researchers to find out more about them and what they do. So I hope you found this session helpful, and I hope it's been a source of inspiration for you with whatever you're doing right now, whether you're studying, working, or applying for higher education, so that you know and understand that you can do something to make a difference. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Leonie. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.